Hey guys, Mike Chase here with a video today, and it's about my favorite team, my favorite player in the NFL, Green Bay Packers, Aaron Rodgers. Looks like this thing is going to come to an end in a pretty messy way. I don't know if I predicted that last year after the draft. I'm not 100% sure, but I definitely felt like this was going to end up being what was going to happen. And if you haven't heard the news, I'm not sure how you haven't, but if you haven't been keeping up with things, basically Adam Schefter put out a tweet that Aaron Rodgers and the relationship with the front office is basically beyond repair, and he wants out, or he is prepared to just sit out this entire upcoming NFL season until he is traded away. And we've heard from multiple sources now that Brian Gutekunst, the GM who drafted Jordan Love last year, head coach Matt LaFleur, and president of the Green Bay Packers Mark Murphy. Now, a lot of people sort of don't understand how the power structure in Green Bay really works, seeing as how the Packers don't technically have an owner. There's no owners of the Green Bay Packers. It's like a trust. You have a board of trustees that basically sort of kind of run the Packers, and they put the president in position, which is Mark Murphy, to basically kind of be the de facto CEO of the Green Bay Packers. A lot of those decisions, as my phone goes off, the patented Mike Chase phone going off, but that's basically how the power structure is in Green Bay. You have the board that sort of, rules on things, and then you have Mark Murphy that sort of runs the business side of things. And then you have the GM that does the football stuff, and then the head coach. That's sort of how it goes down. Mark Murphy, president, CEO of the Packers, flew out to Green Bay, or flew out to Los Angeles or California, wherever Rodgers is. And they've tried working this thing out, I believe, since the end of the season, which was that NFC Championship loss. And nothing has worked. There was that report sort of quickly after the game, where there was this vibe that felt like Rodgers didn't know what his future was going to hold with the Packers. That's something that got dismissed when he came and did his exit interview. There was a few days after the NFC Championship game, it was like, oh man, is this going to end here in Green Bay? Is he going to ask out? And then that sort of got hushed. And now it looks like and this is somewhat spurred up again. And then, from the sounds of things, they offered him a contract extension, whatever the terms of it he didn't like, he wanted out. And I do think this is going to be it. It sounds like he's dug his heels in. And I think I do want to say something, and this is sort of me getting into this. I don't think this has everything to do with the Jordan Love pick. I think this more has to do with, frustrations. I almost feel like a lot of this can sort of lead back to that NFC Championship game in Seattle. I think a lot of the issues from the Packers current day can sort of be traced back to that loss. And I think subsequently after that loss, the front office's indifference and sort of lack of, I don't want to say intuitiveness, that's not even a word, but the lack of action, the lack of free agency action after that loss, I think bothered a lot of people. We've heard as much. It's bothered, even after the first Super Bowl, it sort of bothered people within that locker room. I believe James Jones has talked about this, former Packers receiver, has talked about that. How a lot of people in the locker room was sort of talking like, man, can we just go out and get an extra guy? That's all we need to do is just get, one or two extra pieces. Doesn't even have to be, so many Packer defenders here in the state of Wisconsin will say, well, they don't have the money to go out here and pay big name free agents. Well, that's a lie. In the past, they have. Everyone talks about Aaron Rodgers' contracts and what that does for free agency. We're talking about years ago now. We're talking about 6-7 years ago, where his contract was a bargain, and you could have went out and signed free agents. You could have went out and got, an actual extra receiver, a tight end, a DB, an edge rusher guy. And the few times the Packers did go out and dabble in free agency, it did work. It was like, well, you know, go out and get an extra linebacker. You know, there was just years where they had nothing at linebacker up until around 2016 when they did draft Blake Martinez. Was a solid, okay starter, but, you know, just wasn't, I think, what they needed, I felt, and just really can't cover worth a damn, but not getting into that. But I think that's sort of what a lot of this frustration stemmed from. I think it was just years and years of that. The whole Mike McCarthy situation, where I personally think those two guys, Rodgers and McCarthy, I think just grinded each other down because they had to overcompensate at what they were trying to do, because they knew if they weren't at the top of their game, if they weren't all world, all pro, this team was going to falter, because they didn't have a defense for many years to fall back on with Dom Capers at the helm running a bottom 5 defense in the league year after year after year. You know, you have a situation where they're past, I believe, 9 out of 10 first-round draft picks have been defensive players. And what do you have to show for it? You don't have a top 5 defense in the past 10 years now, I feel like, to show for that sort of commitment to the defensive side of the ball. The one time you did draft an offensive player, it was Jordan Love. So I think from Rodgers' standpoint, I think he's finally looked at the results of the past 10 years since Super Bowl 45. And I think he's finally just came to the conclusion in his mind, I'm not going to win another Super Bowl here in Green Bay. They're not willing to give me an extra 2-3 years, to the point where he could give up money on this year's contract. He could have saved them, could have easily saved an extra $20 to $25 million they could have went out and spent in free agency. I think he saw that. They saw that they weren't willing to do that because they're so preoccupied with, we have to, you know, make sure Jordan Love gets on the field. And he's like, well, you know what? Fine, let's just speed up this process. You want me out after this season anyways. I think anyone who looked at the contract basically felt Rodgers had 2 years left here in Green Bay for sure. And then after the 2021 season is when they could trade or cut him and be fined financially. And I think Rodgers sees that, and instead of letting himself be subject to that, instead of letting the Packers have that control, he decided, I'm going to grab that control. I'm going to wield the power. You're going to get me out of here a year sooner than you want to do it. And, you know, I think the draft they had this past year was really good. Actually, I do think they drafted some decent players. I think Amari Rodgers, what is he, like 5'9", 5'10", speedy slot guy, the sort of guy that I've thought this Packer team has needed for a couple years. They've sort of been missing that element to their game. One of those gadget guys, reverses, jet sweeps, you know, underneath stuff, can break off a bunch of chunk of yardage, super easy. You know, guys like that. They haven't had a guy like that in a couple years, you know, since Randall Cobb left, really. And I think, you know, I think if things were well, I think Rodgers would probably love that. I think Aaron Rodgers would. I think, you know, I think this team is probably going to be, if Rodgers is back, they would compete for another Super Bowl, I think. But I don't really know. I mean, it's hard to know really that for sure. I think Rodgers, I think it'd be another situation where he would carry them to an NFC championship game and then they fall short again, because it's like, well, the defense just isn't good enough to stop another team. I mean, the San Francisco 49ers, are they going to have that many injuries again this season? Probably not. Are the Packers going to be relatively healthy again this season that they were last year? You don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, I think Rodgers just looking at it and just thinking, I don't think this gives me the best chance to win a Super Bowl in the next 3 to 4 years, because the Packers clearly don't want him around for another 3 to 4 years. So I think he sees that, and I think he's just decided, fine, get me out of here now. Why are we going through the preliminary of this? Let's just do it now. And I think they're going to end up doing it. I think the date is June 1st. I think that's something with the contract, whatever. The Packers won't have that much of a cap hit. I think it'll save them however much money to trade him on or past June 1st. And I think that's where I think that's when it's gonna happen. Where is the question? I think it's gonna be to where he wants. And I think that's something the Packers are gonna have to reckon with. You're not going to get this massive haul because you're not going to trade him to the situation that's going to get you the massive haul, because he will simply say, I ain't going there. I'll just retire. So you're not going to be able to trade him to a team. I'm trying to come up with like teams that are like bad. Like you're not going to be able to trade him to, I think, some of the bottom feeder teams. Like let's say like the Eagles, or maybe, I don't know if you're going to be able to trade him to Washington. And the thing is, I don't know if the Packers want to trade him within the NFC, because I don't think they want to have to reckon with that. So I think likely, I personally do, I think there's so much smoke, and I think it's going to be the Denver Broncos. I don't know if the 49ers are still interested. They did just draft Trey Lance, but I mean, I feel like the 49ers would almost be like, yeah, we drafted Trey Lance, but we'll take Aaron Rodgers for the next 3-4 years. Trey Lance can sit fine. So I think it could end up being a situation like that. Maybe the 49ers, but I really do think it's going to be the Denver Broncos. I don't think it's going to be the Raiders. Their offensive line is a mess. That front office is a mess. I don't think Rodgers wants to go from a mess to another mess. I think the Broncos makes the most sense. I think it's going to be similar to Peyton Manning again, where they just, instead of drafting a great quarterback, because that's really hard to do, I think they're going to end up trading for another one, and I think they're going to get them for pennies on the dollar, honestly. Because the Packers have misplayed this so poorly, have pissed this guy off to such an extreme that he's not going to want to necessarily really work with him on a trade to somewhere that could help benefit the Packers. So I think that's what we're going to see. I think we're going to see Jordan Love starting in 2021. Because I don't know if the Broncos are going to... I don't know if the Packers want to take back a quarterback. Because if the Packers take back Drew Lock and Drew Lock beats out Jordan Love for the starting job, how the hell does that make Brian Gutekunst? How does that make Mark Murphy look? How does that make the Packers front office look like you traded for a guy that this other team didn't want, and he just beat out the guy that you traded up in the draft to get, so you could replace your Hall of Fame MVP quarterback who looks like he's still in his prime years? That just would look terrible. That would be a disaster. So I don't even know if they're going to take back a quarterback. I'm not sure how that deal's going to work. They just I know the Broncos just did something to Teddy Bridgewater's contract. So to me, that seems like that would make the most sense. You end up trading Bridgewater to the Packers, a guy that you have no problem not starting, and you go on from there with Jordan Love as a starting quarterback. What's the Packers' outlook for that for this upcoming season with Jordan Love? I don't know. I personally, I don't think they got all that better defensively. They've maybe got slightly better offensively. You do have Amari Rodgers coming in. You do have Devin Funchess. You bought back Aaron Jones, which makes no sense when you drafted Kylan Hill, I believe his name is. Looks like a really good running back that you got in the 7th round. And then you ended, which sort of makes bringing back Aaron Jones sort of stupid. So that's the Green Bay Packers. They like doing stupid things. So I'm gonna get out of here. I've ranted and raved long. I've ranted and raved long enough here. Just wanted to give you some of my thoughts on this whole situation, and with the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers, and how it's probably all coming to an end. And it doesn't really surprise me much, because I feel like this has been a decade brewing. So I want to thank you all for watching this. Hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.